Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special Rangers review interview with the news that Russell Martin is said to be closing in on becoming the next Rangers boss. It brings me great delight to say we're joined by someone to give us some insight into how he performed at Southampton. Top Southampton journalist Alfie House from the Daily Echo joins us. How's it going, Alfie, first of all?
Yeah, not too bad. Top Southampton journalist. I'll take that. That's a good intro. It's been going. Obviously, the season for us has been dreadful, as I'm sure we'll all know, even north of the border. But yeah, looking forward to a new one.
Yeah, I bet you are. Will Still, of course, has been appointed as the new gaffer with Southampton. Think that's a shrewd move, do you think?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it's mental how sort of young managers are getting now, and I'm getting to that point in my life where I'm going to be older than them soon. I don't really want that to come, but still got a few years left. Yeah, it's a good move. I think I'm looking forward to that.
It'll be interesting to see how he gets on there. Certainly comes with a good reputation. Russell Martin, then, it looks like he could become the next Rangers boss, Alfie. First of all, just on that, I know he's been linked with moves. I know Leicester were linked with him, a move back to Norwich, who were linked as well with Russell Martin. He's been out of the game for a number of months after being dismissed by the Saints. Is this a move that surprises you?
It doesn't surprise me because I feel like Russell Martin's been linked with the Rangers job before. I must admit, I thought he would go to Leicester. I felt that Leicester seemed like a decent fit. He always has to go to a team, in my opinion, who are going to be one of the best teams in the league for reasons that I'm sure we'll discuss in a bit more detail going on. But so yeah, I know it's an interesting one. Obviously, him returning to Glasgow after the spell that he had as a player. And don't get me wrong, we'll talk about that. But he's also spoken about that spell in press conferences in Southampton a number of times. He recognises the fact that he was dreadful as a player at Rangers. So I think it's interesting for him to go back there.
Yeah, he said it himself. He says he was crap, I think, which is, I admire his honesty. It was a poor period for Rangers back then. He's been out of a job for a wee while now. As you said, he has been linked with other roles. When he was initially appointed as Southampton boss from Swansea at the time, Alfie, what was the general feeling amongst the supporters down there at that appointment?
I think, the general feeling was that he obviously hadn't really achieved anything of major note. I mean, he finished mid-table a couple of times with Swansea, but they'd always gotten better. His teams, and even MK Dons, they'd gotten better under his sort of stewardship. So I think at the time we had a new director of footballing who we trusted from Man City, who everyone was sort of behind. So I think they sort of said, well, look, if he's the man that Jason Wilcox wants, then we'll back him. And it works pretty well. I think after a slow start, a couple of sort of heavy defeats early on against the promotion rivals as they were Leicester and Ipswich. After that, they really went on a 25-game unbeaten run, and it really got going. And there was some beautiful football in there. There was mistakes at the back as well, a lot of them. But there was some good stuff in there. So I think Southampton fans, for that first sort of 6 months, they warmed to Russell quite quickly.
Yeah, was it a bit of a change in approach and style of play from the previous manager that was there?
It was. I mean, if you think about that 2022-23 season where Southampton were relegated, I spoke to the owners at the end of it, and they said the biggest mistake we made was changing the game model too much, changing the way we play too much. They had Ralph Hasenhüttl, who's always been linked with Rangers, playing this sort of high press 4-4-2 style. They went to Nathan Jones, which is obviously long ball FC, big strikers getting balls into the box. And then they went back to a high press style under Ralph Hasenhüttl's assistant when they sacked Nathan Jones after 8 games. So then it was like, well, now we're going to go to a totally different direction. It's all about possession, keeping the ball. Russell Martin, Swansea had more possession than anybody else in the world, apart from Man City at that time. So it was clear they were going to take a new direction. And they stuck to that for 15 months. And now we're back into sort of trying to work out where we're going again.
Yeah, we'll look at, the Premier League, as you said, it was a bit of a forgettable season for Southampton last season, but the promotion-winning season when it went up, obviously, via the playoffs, the style of play, you mentioned there about on that great unbeaten run. What was the playing style like? Was it an entertaining watch, Alfie?
It depends who you ask, whether it's entertaining or not. In my opinion, it was entertaining. They scored a lot of goals and they conceded a lot of goals. They won games sort of 4-3 at Birmingham, 5-3 against Huddersfield. But as I said, they also lost games 5-0 to Sunderland, 4-0 to Leicester, maybe 5-0 to Leicester. So there were sort of high-scoring games, and you could be on either side of it. A lot of fans said that it was possession for possession's sake. And Russell Martin's philosophy is all about finding the spare man. His way of playing is he always, no matter where you are, you find a spare man. So that often means you pass backwards. It often means you pass sideways. But it can also mean you play direct and you play straight to the striker if he's the one who's in space. So I don't think it's just necessarily purely possession for possession's sake and passed around the back for the sake of it. But it did to a lot of fans. I think for maybe the older generation especially, they didn't really like that. Not just exclusively them as well. There was a lot of younger fans who felt the same. But ultimately, they're winning a lot of games. So no one really complains when you win a lot of games. They obviously need playoffs to go up, and a lot of people felt that was a failure in itself. Ipswich went up having been promoted from League One the season before, but I think there are a lot of contextual factors to that. On the first day Russell Martin arrived at Southampton, he says that 20 players told him they wanted to leave, and I think ended up maybe 5 or 6 of them did, but he had to try and pull together a big squad. And I think that maybe his man management was potentially his best attribute during his time at Southampton. But having also said that, you'd have players that would come in for 1 or 2 games, make one mistake, and never play again for the rest of the season. Or they come back in again in March, they play 1 or 2 more games, and then they come back out again. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on sometimes that we don't really know. We never really got to the bottom of.
Yeah, interesting. In terms of the defensive side of the game, you mentioned that they shipped a fair amount of goals. What was the sort of weak links in that Southampton side?
Well, they just made individual errors left, right, and centre, and not individual errors because they aren't good enough footballers. Yeah, but because they're taking too many risks. And I think in the Premier League this was a bigger problem. Clearly, I don't mean to be harsh about Russell, but he clearly doesn't know how to organise a defence. That is true. In every single team he's played, he's managed. Despite being a centre half and actually quite a good one, he can't organise a defence. They concede so many goals. But particularly with Southampton, it was passes to the opposition striker, passes to the midfielders, cut off, and just sort of quick turnovers and conceding quite quickly. The only thing I would say as well, it did feel like it got a little bit unlucky sometimes because it felt like in every single game, the opposition would score from sort of 20, 25 yards right into the top corner. You did think, well, can this keep happening? But I think the argument to that is they've got too much space as well. They've got too much space in the opposition, on their box. That does worry me. Defensively, but I think at a club like Rangers, you should be able to score more than the opposition, more than often than not.
Yeah, in terms of the challenge he came up against in the Championship, did he come up against any sides that, of course, Southampton were a possession-based team, have a lot of the ball, but teams that sort of file up in a low block scenario and make it difficult for the opposition to break them down?
He did, yeah, and that was a problem. That was a problem for Southampton. I'm thinking back to they lost 1-0 at home to Millwall, or maybe 2-1 at home to Millwall. They drew 1-1 at home with Rotherham, and that game against Rotherham at home, I think it was in like October or maybe November. They'd been on a decent run, and there were fans sort of booing and shouting and haranguing the players at full time because they just camped up on the opposition box for 90 minutes and somehow failed to find a way to score. The Rotherham striker, it was a long ball in the 80th minute, right up to the top, one header down, and they scored from outside the box. And it's almost like you've wasted all this time. And I say that Millwall game is very similar. Japhet Tanganga header won it for them, having been on top for the entire game. So you'll know more than me about Scottish football. I'm not an expert by any means. If they're going to come up against teams which are going to put 10 men behind the ball, they are a bit more rough and tumble. I think that can be a problem for Russell Martin. And also, we talk about the fact that he'll have a better team than everybody else in a way to say, okay, well, they'll be able to dominate the ball. They'll be able to pass it around a lot. They'll be able to create chances that way. But also, I don't know what the quality of the pitches are like right at the bottom of the division. If they're playing on pitches that are maybe a little bit sticky or a bit patchy or whatever, his players are going to find that difficult. Trying to keep the ball on the floor, it's going to be hard. So there are interesting challenges that I'm sort of intrigued to see how he takes on.
Well, he's going to be coming up with 3 artificial surfaces next season if he's appointed the Rangers boss, which is bonkers in itself and poses challenges that he's going to have to face, that's for sure. They went up the season before last, of course, via the playoffs. Many say it's the best way to go up, certainly if you come out on top at Wembley. Yeah. There's nothing better than that. The feeling last summer then, Alfie, was it one of optimism going into the Premier League under Russell Martin, or was there a feeling that we're going to have to invest in the playing squad? How are we going to get on? What was the feeling last year?
Yeah, I think the feeling was of optimism because when things are going really well under a Russell Martin team, he's everyone's favourite bloke. He's funny in the press when things are going well. He's open and honest, or he certainly says he's honest. And you get behind him because he says things that make you get behind him. He's all in as a person, so he will dedicate his life to the training ground and whatnot. But there is a reality in English football at the moment that no team really can survive. It's 2 years in a row that obviously all 3 teams have gone down. By and large, most of those who come down go straight back up, apart from Luton. So I think everybody knew going into that season that it was going to be difficult. But I remember after they'd lost their first 3 or 4 games of the season, I asked Russell Martin, can you still go on to finish 14th, which is what Southampton did when they lost their first few games of the season the last time they were promoted in 2013 or 2012. And he sort of flipped his lid a little bit. He was like, I can't believe you're asking me that. Of course we can. Don't be so ridiculous. And I was like, well, let's see. And obviously they ended up getting 12 points and they've been humiliated for most of the year. So he can be a little bit sort of fiery in that regard. And I think the journalists who are working with him will have a fun time. It'll be interesting. But yeah, there was optimism, but there was always caution that it's going to be unbelievably difficult. And they spent 100 million quid and got worse, Southampton, which is never a good sign.
No. His playing style, of course, he's certainly someone that sticks to his guns with regards to his beliefs and how he wants to play. That came to his detriment, I guess, last season. Well,
it depends who you ask, again, because, his opinion actually, a little bit my opinion as well. He said on Sky Sports, his first interview after being sacked was that he adapted too much. He changed too much. And obviously the criticism of the entire footballing world is that he didn't adapt at all. They made sort of 10 or 11 mistakes in possession by the time he was sacked in 16 games that led to goals. I watched the third choice goalkeeper, Joe Lumley. I watched him passing it around the back, playing out from the back against Chelsea. And obviously it was a disaster. And you just think, wow, like you've got your third choice goalie and your 2 best keepers are out injured, and you're still asking him to play it around the back, to play out as if he can do that, and he can't. So there is the criticism. But actually, I felt that Russell Martin in that first sort of 5, 6, 7 or 8 games, when they were getting a little bit unlucky, I think he changed the team too much. And I think he thinks that as well. He brought in players that had never played for the club before. And as I said before, they played 2 games, they come back out. The last 2 who came out would come back in. And he kept doing this. He changed formation. He played with no strikers. And no matter what happened, they couldn't get a win. He started away at Bournemouth, obviously not really local rivals, but kind of local rivals. And they played a team with like 4 players who hadn't played that season and no strikers. Tyler Dibbling up front as a false 9. And they got absolutely battered. They were 3-0 down in 25 minutes. They got absolutely humiliated. And after that one, that was the end of Russell Martin for me in terms of his belief. I think he lost his belief then. The players lost belief as well. He still survived another 10 games, by the way, but I think that was the moment where it went. And I think that he changed too much. He changed the team too much. He didn't trust the players that got him up enough, maybe, or whatever. And I think he thinks that as well. So it depends who you ask whether he adapted too much or not enough.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money, of course, last season. Brought a lot of players in, big turnover in terms of the squad. Do you think that never helped matters as well, Alfie? A lot of personnel changes.
Well, I think they had to. It was inevitable. They spent 40 million quid on Flynn Downs and Taylor Howard-Bellis, who were their 2 best players in the Championship, apart from Carl Peters, and they were both on loan. So they had to spend 40 million quid on that. Che Adams, a striker, obviously Scotland international, he left to go to Torino on a free transfer. So they had to replace him, 15 million for Cameron Archer. A couple of other players left as well. Stuart Armstrong left on a free transfer. I'm only just realising how many Scotland internationals we actually had. Stuart Armstrong left on a free transfer. They spent 15 million quid to replace him, Matty Fernandez. So they spent 100 million quid, but they only replaced players who already left. They didn't really strengthen that much. Obviously, the big one was Aaron Ramsdale. They signed Ramsdale for 25 million, which was an upgrade. And to be fair, he's been very good. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. So when you say they spent a lot of money, they did. But relative to the rest of the Premier League, not at all.
Yeah. When did the fans start to turn on them?
September, the season they got promoted, I think, mainly. I'm being serious. Like, there were some fans who were done after 4 weeks. I think the vast majority of fans obviously were, maybe November time. But the game was, they played Spurs at home and they were 5-0 down at half time. It might have been 4-0 in like 20 minutes. I can't remember exactly. And he started in a 4-3-3 for the first time that season. It'd always been 3-5-2 up to that point. And he brought the winger off who hadn't played at all. That's what I'm saying. So Kamini Suleiman hadn't played that season, got his first start. He brought him off after 10 minutes when they were like 3-0 down and brought a centre back on. And I think at that point, fans were like, okay, well, this is the end. And as far as I'm aware, the club had already decided that he'd be sacked that night by half time. And they just, he actually told the players in the dressing room, he said, this will be my last game for the club, lads. Just go out there and don't make it a 9 or a 10-0 because you don't deserve that and I don't deserve that. And that's what he said to them in the dressing room. And they kept it at 5-0 for the rest of the game. But that was the end of Russell Martin.
Yeah. When he departed, and of course, caretaker takes over at the time, and then the lad was it Ivan Juric came in for a period of time as well. Did performances improve? Was there a big change in any way?
Not especially. Simon Rusk was probably a marked improvement as a caretaker, simply because he played 10 men behind the ball and just allowed them to clear the ball straight away. But Ivan Juric, there was a slight improvement, but again, he was similar in terms of he wanted an aggressive man-to-man defensive approach, and that didn't work, and he wouldn't budge from that. So Southampton fans, they felt that they've been let down by sort of stubborn management this season, I think, and they're probably right.
Yeah. Tactically, then, I mean, what was it? The formation you usually went with, was it a sort of 4-3-2-1 or something like that?
Yeah, and in the Championship, it was a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, and it was quite often he would have inverted fullbacks who would sort of come into the middle of the pitch, but he scrapped that midway through the season, and they just played a pretty traditional 4-3-3 with Stuart Armstrong behind the striker and two wingers. And then, as I said, in the Premier League, it was a 5. It's bizarre sometimes. It was a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2 or 5-2-3, whatever you want to call it. But there was times where they play with 5 defenders, 3 midfielders, and then 2 wide forwards. And when I say wide forwards, I mean wide forwards. They would hug the touchline. You have no striker. So you've got Ben Brereton Diaz wide, Adam Armstrong wide, nobody through the middle, just sort of Matty Fernandez coming up to fill the space. So he tried everything. And that was a disaster, by the way. That formation was a disaster. So I think Russell Martin, I think he's a likable bloke from the outside. And I think that he's got big ideas about the game, but I do think there are sort of tactical deficiencies there. But I think that's probably the case with a lot of young managers.
Yeah. In terms of set pieces, I mean, it's something that Rangers have had difficulty with, sort of improved at the tail end of the season. But in terms of conceding goals from them and scoring goals from them as well, it's been a problem. Off the top of your head, Alfie, set pieces under a Russell Martin, is there someone that is very good at them defensively and offensively, or was it a problem area for Southampton?
Yeah, I can't really give you any good news there. I think I don't think they scored a set piece goal under Russell Martin in the Premier League. That came later in the season, and they were conceding a lot of them at the start of the year. In the Championship, they had a specialist set piece coach for a very brief period of time called Andreas Georgesson. He left quite quickly to become manager at Lillestrøm in Norway, and then he moved to Man United after that. When they had him, there was sort of clear improvement, and there was a marked improvement. They didn't concede many. They defended with all 10 men in the box. That was the way they did it, all 10 men in the box, and then they just get out, and they get out safely. Unfortunately, the second season, it was obviously assistant Matt Gill, who I imagine will follow Russell Martin to Rangers, and Colin Calderwood, a former Northampton.
Colin.
The
defender.
Yeah, exactly. He was doing the set pieces with Matt Gill, and the results weren't very good. Unfortunately, they conceded a lot of goals from them, didn't score.
Yeah, and I mean, this move to Rangers, if you are just joining us, folks, then he's said to be closing in on becoming the next Rangers head coach. Could you see it working for him in Scotland? Of course, the old Goldfish Bowl of Glasgow, he has to beat Celtic and topple Celtic's stranglehold on the Scottish game. Do you think he has it in him to get a successful Rangers team on the park and win league titles again?
I think it's a very difficult task, isn't it? Obviously, as you know, Celtic, it seems like they're miles ahead at the moment. Maybe you'd argue it's not quite that far. I know you drew the League Cup final and whatnot. Can I see it working? I can definitely. I'll tell you why I can. I can see it working because ultimately he wants to play a game which dominates the opposition, and I think Rangers for 30 games of a season will be doing that. They'll be dominating the opposition comfortably. You'll have a lot of chances. You'll score a lot of goals, and the opposition strikers, it's certainly lower down the league. They might not be as ruthless as the top strikers in the Premier League, of course. And the reasons I see it maybe not working are. Rangers is a massive club. It's an absolutely enormous club, and there's a lot of pressure, a lot of scrutiny. And I felt that Russell Martin didn't handle that pressure and that scrutiny very well at all when he came to Southampton. Even in the Championship, there was less of that, obviously. But then, especially in the Premier League, when all eyes came onto them, I know that their backroom staff, they read a lot of social media posts. They knew what all the journalists were saying about them. They knew what the fans were saying about them, and things like that. And that worries me. I don't think it's very professional. And I think a club like Rangers is going to be so much said about them. Yeah. So I think that they're going to have learnt from that. And that's not to say they can't learn from that. but they really have to. So that's one of the reasons why maybe I can't see it working. But yeah, I wouldn't like to pass judgment. I think it could go one or two ways. But I'm interested to see how it goes for sure.
Yeah, it'll be intriguing. Can't let you go without asking about Joe Aribo. How's he been getting on with the Saints?
Yeah, well, I know when we signed him, obviously, having scored in the Europa League final, absolutely brilliant achievement. And what I could say
about a belter in pre-season when they first joined as well.
Against Villarreal. Took on half the team against Villarreal. I mean, what I can say about Joe, he's a fantastic bloke. I don't know if you've ever met him. He's one of the nicest guys in the world. I really like Joe. Just such a down to earth. He still turns up to the games in his little friend's VW Polo or something. You know, it's quite funny to watch. It's been a mixed bag. He's redeveloped his game now. He's purely a central midfielder, and he does come in and out of teams. Sometimes he lacks a bit of energy, but he's really physically strong. He's scored a couple of goals. Yeah, he's done okay, Joe. But I think he'll probably leave this summer, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, maybe bring him home is what I say. Bring him back up to the fans would. Yeah, the fans would love that. How do you see Southampton getting on next season, Alfie? Do you think they'll go back up?
I mean, they'll certainly be in the top 4 or 5, but I think it's a toss-up from there, isn't it? Anything could happen. They've got a lot to do. But yeah, I think with the budgets that they are in the Premier League, coming down to the Championship, you really should be up there.
Yeah, well, it's been great having you on. Thank you for giving us a bit of insight into Russell Martin. Not all good. I have to admit that it's fair to say the fans aren't falling over themselves in delight at the prospect of Russell Martin leading Rangers next season. But there you go. But thank you, Alfie, for coming on.
Thanks.
There you go, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed that bit of insight into Russell Martin. We'll keep you updated. Keep your eyes peeled on the social media channels and the website and the YouTube channel. If there's any developments with regards to that, you'll hear it here first. Until then, bye for now.